And we're just, look at this. Here come all the participants into today's webinar. It's so exciting. They're just flowing in right now. Hey all, if you're joining the webinar, just give us a couple of minutes. We just want to make sure that everyone has a chance to get in here and meet everybody. And so much fun ahead. I think everyone sees the gallery. And just give it a couple of more minutes as we see that the participants are coming in. For today, this is May 10th, 2023, Wednesday, May 10th, 2023. Vertalo and North Capitol grilling Colin Johnson, CEO and co-founder of Freeport, otherwise known as Freeport.app. And
it's launch day.
Yeah, just launched today. So why don't we just kick this off? Okay, again, this is being recorded. So for those who have joined us today live on the webinar, I'd like to thank you for joining me, Sarah and Colin, on today's webinar. I'm Dave Hendricks. I am the CEO and co-founder of Vertalo. We are a digital transfer agent that transforms illiquid assets into tradable and transferable digital asset securities. Yeah, what's that mean? We take those things like art and real estate and venture capital, which is in a non-marketable state, and through our digital transfer agent platform, we take those things off of spreadsheets and databases and we transform them into digital and or tokenized assets, which can then be traded, transferred, and very, very soon even pledged as collateral. So I'm really, really excited to introduce you to Colin Johnson of Freeport, the CEO. Sarah and I are going to be peppering Colin with questions, but this is really for Colin to tell you about their launch today and exactly what Freeport's doing. So Colin, why don't you give us a little story about how we got here to today? How'd you get to today's launch?
Oh man, what should I start at, like age 12 or 13?
I think that's
let's figure out.
It's the journey, right? Not the destination. So
there's been quite a history, but maybe I'll start back in my Apple days. So before getting into Freeport and starting this company, actually, I worked at Apple for 5 years. I managed marketing for Apple Cash as a product on the Apple Pay team. Before that, I was at American Express in New York City, where I am today for our live launch that's going to be happening in 2 hours here. But I've been in payments for a long time, and I've been very much into crypto for a long time. And I've been trying to convince Amex and Apple and those types of corporations to get more into the Web3 world. I was unsuccessful in doing that, although I did write a white paper while I was at Apple to try to convince them to do 7 different things in the crypto space, especially using the wallet app. But I realized that I just wanted to get into Web3. It was time. I realized how revolutionary this technology could be. I'm sure that Vertalo feels the same way. And then a certain confluence of events. Sorry, there are children screaming outside. Of events happens. One of those was a good family friend of mine who's a Warhol dealer here in New York City. His name is Michael Haber. Came to me and said, "Colin, I know that you're into crypto. I know you're pretty good at marketing. How can we take the Warhols that we have here in the physical world and basically put them on chain and let a lot of people experience them and invest in them?" And then we started doing research, and I realized, you know what, that's going to end up looking a lot like a security. So we should probably see if there's technology out there that allows us to tokenize securities. And we ended up going through, a wide swath of different potential partners to allow us to tokenize these physical assets, these incredible pieces of art that we have. And Vertalo came out on top. Very much on top, and North Cap as well, actually. And then Dalmore, of course, who's not able to join us today, but that's sort of like the trifecta that allows us to create the incredible user experience that we've got. And I'll show people what that looks like in a little bit here.
Well, that's a great journey. It's making the leap from being a technologist who likes to do marketing to then going and transforming something, as old an industry almost. I'm not sure if industry is the right word, but as old a sector as art. My family's been involved in art collecting for a couple of 100 years. And, in the old days, when you wanted to sell a painting, and this was until really, really recently, you'd have to go take the physical painting, take it to an auction house, or maybe give it to a dealer on consignment, and then they would hang it, and then someone would come in and they would buy it, and they would buy it in whole form, and then maybe they would hang it up somewhere, or maybe they would store it in Switzerland, or maybe they'd donate it to a museum. But what you're doing is actually a whole step function improvement in the ownership of art. You want to explain exactly how different this is than typical art collecting, and maybe even how different it is from NFTs?
Yeah, so one thing I'll point to that you just mentioned is oftentimes wealthy folks who could afford art would just store it in different types of facilities, especially tax-free facilities. You might know where I'm getting at with this, but they were also known as Freeports. So part of the reason that we actually named our company Freeport is because we wanted to subvert that kind of legacy idea. So historically, the art is it's stowed away, right? And very wealthy people are able to trade it back and forth in a tax-advantaged manner. And that's all fine and well, but people don't get to experience that. People don't get to experience the financial upside to that, for sure. And they don't get to experience the sort of visual and aesthetic benefit of being able to collect and own something. So we said, well, what would like a Web3 Freeport look like? Or what would just a digitized global Freeport look like? And we wanted to sort of readapt that name, right? And create this platform wherein the art is pulled out of the deep, dark, dusty places. And we allow folks to come together and invest in that piece of art collectively. And then the sort of differentiator that we've got on our platform too is this virtual gallery. So once you purchase shares in the art, you can actually hang it in the virtual gallery. I'm happy to show people that too when we get into the demo section here, and experience it like a collector would, right? So there's the financial aspect, and the two of you are absolutely critical in empowering that. But then there's also sort of like the visual and social aspect that comes along with art investing. And we're just reimagining all of those things to the point where we think ownership is going to feel a lot different on the Freeport platform.
It's super exciting because you saw over the last couple of years this mass movement towards owning kind of popular art. Maybe it was apes and all kinds of different types of art that folks said, hey, look, this thing's people recognize this. I'm gonna go buy this, and I'm gonna keep it in my wallet. But if they wanted to hang it, it was really hard to do so. They could certainly show people their gallery, but this kind of takes that experience of being able to go buy art online, and then also have actual title to part of that art, and then be able to see the actual physical representation, as well as go into seeing a virtual gallery where you can point people to, right? So you can say, hey, look, send it to your parents, send it to your friends, maybe try to impress somebody, and and even put it in your profile, right?
Yeah. And the other nice part about taking this fractional approach, and I'd love to hear Sarah's point on this too, is that you have the ability to increase the liquidity of the underlying asset, right? It's not just one person that's selling the art and one person buying the art, and you have to have the most fortuitous time possible to get a good price if you're the buyer, or a good price if you're the seller. Now we actually have market forces that can come into play and allow multiple people to purchase things, which means we're going to get a much more accurate price realization of what the underlying asset is. And it's going to be really interesting to see what that does to prices over time when you have millions and millions of new people that can actually afford to enter the art market that historically haven't been able to enter the market. And fractionalization is really what allows for that.
Now, Sarah, tell us a little bit about because we talked about payment, right, in the beginning, and so how are you working with Freeport on this, approach to payment rails?
Sure. Yeah. So first of all, I'm Sarah. I'm COO of North Capital, and what North Capital focuses on is powering and enabling and scaling the entire life cycle of a private security. And really what we bring to the table, in addition to our technology solution, is the regulatory and domain knowledge to be able to help our clients be able to navigate being able to create a great user experience while complying with securities regulation. So there's a couple pieces where we're working with Freeport, and the first is in terms of just connecting with our escrow facilitation services. So when you're raising capital, if you know there's typically a contingency. So we're going to raise X amount. It's going to be fractionalized among these 2,000 investors, which is pretty awesome when you think about what that means in terms of impact. We're going to hold that money until everything has been done, is signed off on, and then release the funds. So that's a key role that we play, is creating those payment rails to connect. And then we also support post life cycle in terms of secondary trading. So we're really, involved in working behind the scenes, from I'm ready to make my first investment to I want to explore liquidity solutions through the ATS. What's really cool with Freeport and why we're super excited with working with them is they've developed an ecosystem. So while we are helping power and facilitate this on the back end, from a user experience, you are completely engaging and staying within Freeport's ecosystem. And I want to just go back for a second to this concept of fractionalizing ARCs. I think it's worth just spending a moment on how significant this is for an investor, and why we're excited about this partnership is, we talked a lot about, okay, historically you buy the piece of artwork. One thing about this fractionalization, which we're seeing in all sorts of collectible assets, is think about what that means in terms of building a portfolio, about potentially not being overexposed to just one asset. So working with groups like Freeport, you can now take, the funds that ordinarily would, acquire one asset, and you can have that diversified among multiple assets. And what I'm excited to take a look at in this demo, and what was like really exciting for our team with Freeport, is this virtual gallery. Because these are sentimental buys often, right? Like you typically, you're excited about the product, you're excited about what the asset is. But I think what you're doing is making it tangible. And I'm just curious, what drove you to, was that part of the original business plan, or was that as you did market research, you noticed a gap? I'm kind of just curious what took you in that direction.
Yeah, so there are some important stats that are really helpful here. One is, so when people purchase art, for the most part, there are only 5 to 10% of people that buy it just as a financial instrument right now. It's coming onto the scene a little bit more, and that number will probably grow over time. But historically, it's only been about 5 to 10%. And then another 15% only buy it for the aesthetics, so that they can hang it on their wall, like that piece back there, tell their friends about it, and enjoy it visually. The vast majority, 80% of people or so, want both. They want both the financial exposure and knowing that they may have some upside in the future, but they also want to be able to engage with the art and to enjoy it visually and to talk with their friends about it. So we said, well, we can bring both of those things to life digitally, right? We can power this via these securitized tokens that actually represent real ownership in the entity that holds the artwork. But then we can also display the artwork in such a way that people will be able to socialize. So when we look at the gallery, and I could pull that up actually, would that be useful?
Yeah, I think that would be a great thing to do.
Yeah, let's get into some visuals. Let's make it fun. So I'm actually going to use a sample. We have a baseline gallery, but this is one that we created that's based upon pieces of art in the Uffizi Gallery in Italy right now, just because we thought it would be a fun little use case. So when you arrive here in the gallery, let me just make that full browser. You'll see that we have a bunch of different pieces of art that are hanging. And by the way, this is in browser. So this works on mobile. It works on desktop. You don't have to download an app. This is all made using WebGL. And it's incredibly high fidelity. This is all custom developed. But if I go ahead and click on a piece of art here, let's just look at the first one in the gallery. You can see that we've got the Birth of Venus. You're actually able to play around with it once it comes off the wall. So we've given the pieces of art depth. This is pretty cool. We're also letting people connect their wallets if they're into Web3 to display their NFTs. But if they know nothing about NFTs or Web3, totally cool. It'll just be the art that they purchase on our platform. But you can see, you can play around with the art here. And you'll see on the right, we have likes and views. And in the future, at some point, we'll have more communal spaces as well, and have things like comments, so that if I drop into Dave's gallery and he's got all the cool Warhols and crap, they've sold out and I can't have them anymore, well, maybe I can go take a look, and Dave can share his gallery with me, and I can see them there. So we also have the details here in the standard gallery. So when you actually, let's say, purchase some shares of a Warhol, you'll see the number of tokens that you have here too. So you'll see the total number of shares that are outstanding for the piece of art. You'll see the amount that you own and other kind of key statistics around the financial instruments as well. But for us, it was really important that we had a smooth, buttery, high fidelity experience. You can see there like sun rays that are coming in from the sky. We had to decide like how much sun do we want so that it doesn't interrupt the actual vision of the art, but it still makes it feel realistic. So we had a lot of discussions like that, and we made it as easy to navigate as you possibly can. You can just use, as you'd care for it to be, you can just use 2 fingers to sort of move around. And again, it works very, very well on mobile too. So if people want to check this out, they should go to gallery.freeport.app. But you can imagine, you can see down here, there's a leaderboard, right? And you can see there's sort of my gallery. When I log in, there are customization elements. So you can change the frames, you can change the locations that the artwork lives in within your gallery. And then the leaderboard is actually going to show people like, hey, how much art do you own, right? It's almost like a number that you can flex with and say, well, I bought all 4 of the first 4 Warhols that were in the first collection, or all of the Basquiat's in the second collection, or all the Keith Harings, or whatever else, whatever other artists that you decide to collect. And then you have this experience like the one that I mentioned, where you're not just having this sort of financial exposure to the asset via the tokenized shares, but you're also able to engage with other people and communicate with them and comment and like on their galleries in a way that I think people have come to enjoy and expect in the world that we live in today.
You know, this is great. I also love all the old masters, right? Instead of going to a museum, you're going to be able to see these things in a different context. Let's talk about structure, though. For the folks who are calling in, who are on this webinar, and folks watching this later, how are you able to make something like this such an expensive asset? How can everybody purchase this? What was the legal structure that you used to do this? What makes it so easy for everyone to buy? And then importantly, for those folks who are looking at this in a transactional way, what's making it easier for them to also trade it?
So a lot of people make a lot of money on alternative assets, and a lot of those alternative assets are limited to accredited investors. In our case, we didn't want to just limit things to accredited investors. In fact, one of our trademarked slogans is ownership for all. Like, we want everyone to be able to access these things. To some degree, we think that accreditation might be a silly concept, frankly, but we could talk about that in a different call. But we wanted to make sure that everyone could do this, right? So that meant we had to go Reg A. And Reg A allows us to sort of create, it's this exemption, I guess, from technically being a security. But anyways, that's a technicality. It allows us to issue shares and things legally to the public and to broadly solicit and to allow investors to come regardless of whether or not they make $200,000 a year or own more than $1 million of assets and invest in these shares. And then Vertalo, of course, allows us they act as our transfer agent, not just to be the sort of ultimate source of truth for where those shares live, but then they go ahead and tokenize those shares too. And the tokenization lets them live on the blockchain, which in the future, we believe will open up all kinds of different utility, right? When you have one form of value and you can just trade it for another form of value because you're using the same software system and everything is interoperating well, then a whole bunch of sort of opportunities arise. Regulation still has to come around to allow for many of those things, to be clear. But having this tech stack, that goes through NorthCap and Vertalo allows us to, market to the masses, to bring these types of alternative investment assets to folks, and then to give them a really cool experience in the front end too. The last thing I'll say is, Sarah mentions you two both make it seamless, right? So we can just present Freeport on the front end, and that was critical. We spoke with a lot of transfer agents, we spoke with a lot of escrow agents and a lot of ATSs, and a lot of folks don't want to allow the sort of issuer to have that kind of control, but you two did, and that meant that we could create the experience where someone comes to Freeport, they purchase their art, they display their art, and they feel like they're in and of Freeport, and they're not authing into a bunch of different other platforms. So that was really critical for us.
Yeah, I mean, getting rid of friction, right? Getting rid of technical hurdles, making the experience better. That's important. When people go to galleries, it's supposed to be a great experience, right? You imagine walking into a gallery and you like seeing something hanging on the wall, and then they say, wait, but first you've got to go down the street and you've got to fill out all these papers, and then you have to wait in this room for a week. Okay. And then in 3 months, maybe you'll pass this test and we'll ship it to you. This is much more almost of an impulse purchase, right? For anyone who sees something that they love.
We want people to have high conviction, but we want it to also feel as easy as Amazon. So I can actually quickly walk through one of the purchases right now that NorthCap and Vertalo are powering. Just so everyone's aware who's watching right now, this is going to be a live purchase. So we went live publicly today. We were open to early access a couple of days ago, but I'm just going to pop over here to Freeport. If you go to Freeport.app/discover, or you can just click invest when you get to the platform, this is all now open, right? So if I go down to, let's do Double Mickey, because Double Mickey happens to be my favorite. It's got diamond dust all over it. You can see a few different images of the actual artwork itself here, but you just go ahead, you can see how many have already been sold. And again, we just launched today, so we're actually seeing pretty solid momentum here. You hit the invest button. I've already connected my bank account, right? So this is giving me a recommendation of 50 shares, but you can update the quantity to whatever you want. The minimum is going to be 10. The maximum is 10% of the whole asset. So if someone really loves Double Mickey, they can come in and they can purchase it up to 1,000 shares per account. But I'm just going to continue with 50 here. In my case, I've already selected the payment method, so it skipped over that. But we've integrated Plaid, or rather NorthCap has been fantastic enough to integrate Plaid. So you can see that my bank account is connected here. We also accept credit card or wire transfers. You get to the paperwork. You tap here. You can view the subscription agreement. You can view it in a new window if you really want to get into the details, but then you just have your name here, you hit sign and continue to summary, check this little box here, and then hit agree and invest. And that is effectively it. Now, once the transaction completes, we're actually going to show at the end here. So these are all I've made a few transactions because I believe in the artwork. But so you can see the transactions that I've made here and the most recent one, right? So you can see they're all in pending status. Once the offering closes, that's when we'll actually distribute the shares. But that's it. Like, that's the entirety of the process. We really want it to feel as seamless as possible for folks, because it doesn't have to be some arcane science. And really, again, like, NorthCap has been fantastic in working with us on this front.
That's fantastic. So someone who's a webinar attendee was asking, how is this different from some of the other previous efforts at what folks call democratizing access to fine art or fractionalizing art? What's your different take?
So one of the most significant pieces is kind of what we just went through there for a minute. It's the actual gallery and the ownership experience. As I mentioned before, most people who purchase art don't just want financial exposure to it. So that's sort of the, if you look at some of the other folks, it's more of the exchange view. You get like candlestick charts, you get ticker symbols, and like, that's kind of it. That's all that you've got going for you when it comes to collecting. And then you hope in 5 or 6 years that you get some kind of a payout. A lot of those platforms also, by the way, don't have an easy secondary market. I'll just say I bought some shares of a Basquiat on Masterworks like 9 months ago. And it's a very, very low liquidity secondary market. They don't actually put any emphasis on it. So you saw that we have like a leaderboard, right? And we want to engage people and give them rewards for collecting multiple pieces and be social, because we want to increase liquidity. We want people to be trading back and forth constantly. And we're going to actually support that and attempts to make that like a key pillar stone of our platform, rather than just saying, hey, buy some shares and in 7 years, hopefully we sell it and you get some kind of a payout. I'm not saying that's terrible, by the way, because art does perform really well historically. Like, it outperforms the S&P 500. That's why alternative assets can be so appealing to folks, and why it's a little bit unfair that only accredited investors have historically been able to access them. But so we've got the gallery view, which is significantly different. The focus on having a secondary market and a vibrant sort of community around the art collecting itself. And then we're also tokenized on chain. So this is something that's going to be unlocked over time, but we're building on a fundamentally different tech stack. Right. So when you have tokens and they're visible on chain, and Vertalo is empowering us to let people pull them out into their wallet, well, that means that if someone goes to a different platform and that platform wants to recognize that this is an owner of the Maryland, of the hot pink Maryland on Freeport, they can recognize that and they can create an experience for the customer that's better, that's enhanced. Or we can use the tokens to create gated experiences in the future, right? Even if we want to just have like, a Discord chat that's only for people that own a piece of the Double Mickey or the Mick Jagger or the James Dean. Because we've tokenized, everyone else that's building things on blockchain at some point in the future will be able to interact with these tokens. There are some limitations because these are security tokens and you can't just treat them like they're ERC20s. And like, obviously we have to be above board when it comes to those guidelines, but we're taking the incremental step to ensure that our investors will be able to, as soon as regulation allows, engage with that world. So a lot of ways that we're different. Also, we have badass Warhols that come from the collection of Jane Holzer.
Yeah.
So there's that too.
Yeah, but you should talk a little bit about Baby Jane maybe too. And so the provenance of these your kind of inaugural Warhols is pretty insane. This is about as pure provenance as you can get. You want to tell us a little bit about,
Yeah. So I'll be hanging out with Jane. I'll be hanging out with Jane immediately after this call, by the way, if we're going to Zero Bonds in New York to have the launch event. So Jane is this incredible woman. She was a Warhol muse in her younger years. She's in her 80s now, but she could just be in her 20s still. Like, she's incredibly energetic, incredibly sharp. She's been an investor and a supporter and an advisor since day one of Freeport. And she's actually allowing us to procure artwork that's from her collection, right? So for a little context, she has Warhols of herself hanging in her house in Manhattan. So she, walks up to bed every night and sees the painting that Warhol made of her. So she is an incredible person. She's also into real estate. Her family is like wildly impressive.
Yes.
But she's on top of it, and she gets the Web3 stuff too. She's like, yeah, let's do this. Like, let's go. We're going to have, just as an example at the event today, 7 different local New York publications that want to come and see what we're doing. And I'll bet a few of them just kind of want to see Jane. Like, she's a very impressive person, and she's got one of the most incredible art collections of all time, especially when it comes to Warhols. And that's critical, right? Because you care about where the art comes from when you're in this world, and she's going to continue to help us source over time, which is massively important.
So you've got these first 4, and these are really iconic. They're instantly recognizable, and I'm sure you've got some more kind of queuing up for the next launch. What are your thoughts on that?
We have plans. There will likely be more Warhols in our future. Let me just say that, because people recognize them and they sort of, they're attracted to them. Even if you're not in the art world, you can understand Warhol, or you might have seen the Netflix special as an example. So likely a bit more pop art and contemporary art, and very cool. There are actually 1 or 2 things that we were going to have in this collection, but we wanted to just keep it to the icons for launch. So there's a lot more to come on that front, but just know that they're going to be sourced through the exact same types of channels that Jane, a few of our other advisors who are significant art collectors here in New York City, and a few people that we're actually going to go chat with today about that. But we can't announce anything formal at the moment.
So for those art collectors who will see this, what if they wanted to offer up something in their collection? What if they had something that was, they have some herrings, some Basquiat, some, Rothkos, like amazing stuff. They might want to keep hanging it in their house, but they might want to sell part of that to your audience. Is that something that people could do? Could just collectors who might want to diversify, could they work with you?
So one thing collectors could do, if they wanted, is that, first of all, it's very simple. We sign a contract that says, hey, we'll take your piece of art, we'll fractionalize it, let a bunch of people sort of invest in those fractions. Then it'll exist on Freeport where it can be bought and sold. And in the future, we'll sell it. It is important to us that we can have a secondary moment of commerce, because we want the people who buy our shares to know what to look forward to. If we're just giving liquidity to someone that's keeping it on their wall indefinitely, and we're not going to sell it in the future, then it's much harder to say, hey, I'm sure that at some point in time, this will be gainful for me, right? So we want to make sure that there is a secondary moment of commerce in the future. But for collectors that want to maintain some equity in their paintings, they can maintain like 10 or 20%, and then we can sell, the other 80%, let's just say, or allow people to invest in the other 80% as an example, and sort of go from there. But we will always we'll always need to maintain the ability to sell it in a secondary market, because we want to make money for our investors, right? Yeah. And so we'll have to have that flexibility.
So it's basically a chain of custody kind of concept that you've got to maintain here. You have to have custody of it. Doesn't mean that someone can't still have interest in it, not hanging it on their wall.
Right. And while there might be some way that we're not doing this currently, but there might be some way that it could continue hanging on someone's wall until it's sold in the future, as long as it's properly insured and we know that it's temperature controlled. So there are a lot of limitations on, how we treat the art right now, and we make sure that we keep it in like the best possible facilities. So we'd be open to discussions with folks, but at the end of the day, the investors are most important. Sorry, Sarah.
Yeah, actually, I just wanted to piggyback on that comment. And could you, I think something, when someone owns, only a portion, they're really putting a lot of trust in you to be able to maintain and protect that asset. So maybe you just alluded to it, but could you give, a little bit more background on when you acquire an asset, what do you do to protect that asset in terms of storage and who's kind of in custody of that?
Yeah, so excellent question. So these are going to be stored in an actual Freeport. I know I was talking before about how Freeports are these these bad places that people have been able to avoid taxes in, but they also happen to be really good places to store things and to store them safely and securely because these people have been doing it for decades and decades. So we'll be keeping them in a facility that is temperature controlled, that's climate controlled. They'll be fully insured. So every year we'll get appraisals on the pieces of artwork, and then you pay a proportion of the value of the artwork. That's part of the reason that we do have, a 1.5% ongoing fee for these things, which people should be aware of. But it's because we have to pay insurance. Insurance on art is not cheap, actually. So if you go and buy $1 million piece, there's a good chance you're paying upwards of 1% on an annual basis to insure that piece. But we manage all of that. We don't want people to have to think about that. We want people to just be able to invest in the shares, gain financial exposure, and sort of engage as a collector. But it's all here in the US. We are a Delaware C Corp. All of the entities are series LLCs. So like collectively, it's all happening in a very constrained space. And again, we also went through the entire SEC process to ensure, and they audit us, they look at us as founders, they make sure that you're not snake oil salesmen that are doing these things, and treating the artwork really properly is kind of a part of that great process.
Well, and I think that's it.
Go ahead, Sarah, please.
Oh, I was just going to add that the structure is an investor is investing in the series LLC in that entity. Correct. And that entity owns the asset. Is that correct?
Yep, that's right. It's like we consider it a very lightweight container that allows us to fractionalize ownership of one single asset, and that's the artwork in this case.
Great.
So a question from another attendee, kind of similar, do you need to deploy full capital to buy these pieces before you sell the shares? Like how does your ownership, what's your ownership structure for this? It's basically a question of, do you have ultimate title, or is there some other dynamic?
Sure. So the way that this works is we buy rights to purchase basically from the people that have the artwork currently. So what that says is we're not going to pay you today, but you cannot sell this piece of art, like it's under contract. And what we're going to do is go raise money via the series LLC structure so that we can allow people to invest. Once we can complete that raise of funds, then we pay the folks, and then we take custody of the artwork, right? And really it's the series LLC that takes custody of the artwork. Mm-hmm. And then that's stored and properly sort of accounted for. So hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, and there's a follow-on question from that. So that was from Vincent Wang. So thank you, Vincent. And also a question from Ken, another attendee, and this is in the similar vein. What are the disclosures? How do you prove title? And kind of certify the underlying asset. So if you say, hey, look, I'm selling shares in this, it's like the question is, are you selling the Brooklyn Bridge, right? And that's
the SEC sees all of these things. So you have to show the actual the purchase agreement. So that contract as an example that I just mentioned to you all, and sort of like the identifying factors and documentation and things like certificates of authenticity, we submit those to the SEC. So they actually see a little bit of our business process, right, to ensure that these are actual assets that exist somewhere, that there is sort of a title for them or like proof of transfer of ownership. So all of that happens during the SEC approval process.
Yeah, and that's a matter
SEC
of
qualification process.
Qualification, yeah. And the SEC doesn't sign off or approve it, they qualify it. And so this is all a matter of public record, but also keep in mind, and we didn't really mention them, but Dalmore Group serves as the managing broker. And so they're a broker dealer in the deal. They have a diligence process to verify these documents. And then North Capital as escrow facilitator, and again, going back to that earlier question of the purchase process, that's all of these steps that we're talking about today are steps designed to protect investors. The funds going into an escrow account until the purchase is complete and the funds can be released, that's designed to protect investors so that if it doesn't happen, the funds get returned to investors. So each of these steps in the process have reviews by the parties involved before proceeding, and that process is repeated with every asset. So it's scalable, but it's our job is to get into the weeds.
Yeah, I think to amplify what you just said, Sarah, all the partners, all Freeport's partners who are represented on this call, that would be Vertalo as a transfer agent, escrow agent, payment processor, North Capital, and Reg A broker dealer. We're all accredited in our own way through regulators. So we have to comply with regulations. A Dalmore, as Sarah put it so well, they have to do the diligence. So they can't, before they'll even take on something like what Colin and his team at Freeport are doing, is they have to go through their own process to make sure that this is legit, because they are representing Freeport out to the market effectively. And so for those who are listening here and who have questions, you just wouldn't be able to see any of this if it hadn't been through a process that has to satisfy not just Freeport, but also Dalmore, Vertalo, and North Capital. So it has to be legitimate.
And we, just so you know, we specifically chose this route because we didn't want to be like other groups that are like in crypto and say, hey, we're in BVI, or we're in Singapore, or we're in the Bahamas, and we're just going to set up some kind of an entity here and just trust that like this bottle of whiskey that we're telling you you're buying is with us, right? We said like, no, we're going to do this in the US. We're going to store the artwork in the US. We're going to go through the SEC compliance process so that people know, so that people won't have to ask questions like that, I guess, about like, hey, like what's the provenance of the art, or where is it coming from? Are these people legitimate? By the way, our whole team is like, we're very much doxed and very public, right? So you can see it, you can check us out on the Freeport website. Also, for a more fun sort of proof, we dropped a tweet today that has a hype video of like the whole Freeport team sort of hanging out with the art and doing a little bit of a photo shoot with it, so people can check that out on their Twitter profile too.
So fun.
Mm-hmm.
I think that we've really covered so much ground, so many great questions here. I want to thank all the attendees. Do you want to pop a screen, Colin, so that everyone here can figure out where to go? I think it's pretty simple. You can go to Freeport.app, but I'm sure you have something as beautiful as the art.
Sure. Well, I will just say the easiest thing to do is to go to Freeport.app right now. You can see at the top here, the Warhol collection is now live. There's a lot more information here, I will say, right? So you can learn about exactly how the process works, get a little bit more of the step-by-step here, right? Like source the art, fractionalize it, we offer shares, and then once there are any profits to distribute, they get distributed to holders. I should note also, there's an offering circular that people should go visit, before investing. They'll actually see it during the investment process too, but it's down here at the bottom of the website. You can just click view offering circular, and in some more obvious places. And then they can also just go hang out in the gallery, right? So we've got this 3D gallery that they can just jump into. They can see what we've done historically. We've got kind of a standard gallery, the UFET gallery I just showed you all, and a few that are more Web3 oriented if people are bent in that direction. But really, Freeport.app is the place to go to take part in this collection. We've had a ridiculously successful little day today. We're super happy about kind of the purchases that are flowing in, and we're about to go have this live event where there's going to be a bunch of media, and there will likely be some stories that come out over the next few days. So we're excited to see that too.
That's great. Well, make sure to share that information with us. We'll get it out to our subscribers, both North Capital's group, Vertalo's group, and Dalmore's group. We want to continue this to fuel this fantastic momentum. Just want to say how amazing it's been to work with you. Our team here at Vertalo loves working with you and your team at Freeport. I think I speak for Sarah, Eitan, who unfortunately is not here, and the team at Vertalo, that we're extremely proud to be part of this transformative effort, and expect and know that we'll see great things from Freeport. So so much fun.
Thank you. It's been fantastic for us too. Thank you both for teaching us so much so quickly. And sorry, Sarah, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just say congratulations. We're excited, and thanks for letting us participate in giving more information about Freeport.
Awesome.
Great. Well, for all the attendees, thanks for taking time out of your day to come here and learn about Freeport and its work with Vertalo, Dalmore, especially North Capital. We're looking forward to great success for Colin and his team, and Jeff. Sorry, Jeff's not here. Say hi to Jeff here. And
He's setting up currently.
he's setting up. Someone's got to do the real work. And thanks for taking the hard questions from the audience today, Colin. And looking for more about you in this space soon. So good luck this afternoon, and see you all later.
Awesome. Thanks a lot. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.